Hello and welcome to this hide and slide card tutorial. What I'd like to do is just run through with you how we can make these cards using the template. Now they're really simple to do, but don't let the template put you off. It looks a little bit complicated, but really it isn't. We're just using sections within it. And it was, rather than giving you a huge template or a number of templates, I've just tried to design it so you get it all in one. So first of all, I want to say don't panic. It really is very, very simple to do. In fact, we really only need 4 bits of card out of it to make it. Okay, so talking of card, I've made these with 160 GSM throughout, but you can also use 250, and I think that works nicely for the cover. So it's up to you. You've got a range of, say, something from about 160 GSM through to about 250 will be adequate to make the cards. If you've got slightly thicker, you can use that for the outside. Just experiment and see. I suppose really bottom line is use whatever you want, but I think cards just feel a bit better if they're thicker. So I will leave that to you. Over the course of this, what I'll do is just explain what we're doing and what we need. But from the offset, you're basically looking to have a good sharp pencil, a ruler, a craft knife and some scissors. And we need some good strong glue, or wet glue. And of course, we'll look at these as we go through. And what you'll be able to do with this template is make some really lovely cards like these. In this example, I've used the diamond shape. You can see we get this lovely reveal as we open the card with a little message or an image inside. I think they just look fantastic. So that's the diamond shape we can make. And you can see now I can decorate it as well. And on this one, we get a lovely big reveal on our card like so. And it's really made up in the same way. So these two give you an idea of what we can do with our card making and how we can use the template. So let's make a start, and we'll begin with the template, and I'll show you how we draw out our basic shapes. Now I've chosen my image to work with, and really you're probably better off with a patterned paper, because when these fold in, if I just bring in a card here to show you, when we fold it in, the pattern is near enough that it doesn't notice. But I've chosen an object here, but I'm going to decorate the card, so I'm going to push on with that. But just thinking about it, it might be better to have had a more patterned paper, but I could move. The nice thing with the templates, you can move this around, because I'm going to work on the inside here, but the main image is on the outside there. So I think without further ado, I'm going to work on the lighter side here and show you what we do. Okay, so at this point, with everything down, I'm now just going to place this in position. I'm just drawing in the lines here. This is our outer line, so if you miss 1 or 2 of them, it's not the end of the world. I'll just come round and hold that in position. The trick with this is to either decide you're going to work to the bottom or the top of the template line, the channel rather, so that you don't start down there on one and then say up there on the other. It'll make life a little bit awkward for you. Now these channels are quite tight because we've got a degree of accuracy needed on this here, but you can go back with a ruler if you want to. I think my lines are a little bit wobbly. Okay, so first of all, we just draw the box around there. Now I'm going to do the triangular shape, so I'm going to drop this one. Again, I'm going to let my pencil go to the outside line there, and I've got to repeat that on the other side, but I'm not going to do that yet. In fact, I want to talk to you about that in a moment. So the next thing we do is these are the panels that drop down. This is the fold to the page. So I'm going to draw these lines in here. Now you could lightly trace this in. This is where the flaps hold. It's a guideline. And again, if you're unsure, from the outer line, just come along, and the first vertical line you meet going all the way across is where we're going to fold the paper. And again, I've got a little, that's just a guideline that we can use later on. Everything else now stays on the template. We remove that, and you can see this is what we're left with. Now at this stage, if you want to, you could just see some of my lines are a bit wobbly there, but if I just line up with the ruler, I can just make sure everything's okay. I'm fairly happy with that. I'm not going to go around and do it all, because the next thing to do is to cut this all out. So if you're happy with the lines and you can see them where to go, then you're absolutely fine. So without further ado, I will just chop all the way around the edge here. Now I'm using a craft knife. You could, if you wanted to, use your guillotine, even a pair of scissors. It's up to you, whatever you feel confident. We do need a degree of accuracy on this, so to square everything up. Because we're using a template, there's always going to be a little bit of variation, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment, because I'm going to show you how we deal with it. Okay, so that's my cuts. My knife isn't the sharpest. I'll make sure everything comes away. Into there. Just before I carry on, you'll notice I don't have to print edge to edge either. That's something just to let you know that you don't have to have edge to edge printing because of the size of the template. And I'll just cut that line through there. I'm just following the lines I've already cut. I'm not a very accurate cutter without a ruler. Okay, so we're there now. These two lines we now score, and I would again suggest using a tool to do that with. So a nice line down there, and again lining up straight as possible, because these are going to fold over. A line there. That's the guideline, so we can leave that. The next thing is just this shape here, and again I'm just going to use my craft knife. It's a nice straight line. Cut that out, and that comes out from there to there. Again, I haven't quite cut as neatly as I could. Just trim that up. Need to press a little bit harder or get a sharper blade. Okay, now we can at this stage come back and use our template, line everything up, because it will line back up with our existing lines, flip it over and draw in that shape there. But before and then cut it out. But can I just show you another technique? So that's one. First off, I'm going to fold these over, and I'll explain why. Because so with my ruler under there, I can fold that over and come back here. Now you're going to find that this left-hand one, depending on where you've drawn your lines, might be a little bit long, because these have to join up accurately, and we've got bits inside, and we can't always guarantee that the fold lines were going to be accurate. If you can see here, I'm just a couple of millimetres out, which is what I suspected because of my lines. So at this point, before I draw the next shape in, I'm just going to shave off a little line along here of paper or my card, and just pop that back until I'm happy that that's just about touching. Now, because I've got more underneath it, it doesn't have to be a totally accurate fit, but that's pretty good there. And the reason, that's one of the reasons I haven't drawn this shape in, because if I do and I chop a few bits off, it goes out. Now, we can use our template again. We could just mark, I think it's great at this point, we could just mark there and there, so we know that this now has to go there. Or alternatively, you can use the waist shape, especially if you're using a 250 GSM card, and just draw around that. And then you know that when you open this, all the points line up. So if I just draw that like so, and then with my pencil, I can just neaten that up, just so I know where I'm going. I'm happy with that. So again, with my craft knife, whoops, I'll just come in now and cut out that one there, like so. Move it around, and again, cut out from there. Put a little bit more pressure on. Just come back into that corner. Flip it over. There's no upside down particularly at this point, and we can see now everything, it all matches nicely when we close the card. we've got our points there. So that's fantastic. The next thing I would suggest that we do is get some nice creases on there. So with a bit of paper on there and a bone folder, I'm just going to crease my paper there. So we get a nice fold down, and that goes nice and flat. There we go. So that's our starting point, and we can build up the rest of it now. So the next thing we're going to do now is just make the slider mechanism that reveals the card. And I'm going to use this inner box here, and I'm going to do it on some gold card. I think something which has got a very tight pattern to it works best. That way it doesn't really sort of show up if things don't match up. And I'm going to work obviously on the back of this. So just flip that over, and then working on the inside shape. So this is the mechanism that we're using, as I said, and it's this one here. It's the shape that's in the center of the template here. If I draw around, you should see it. So we go all the way around. Again, just create the outline using my pencil, and it creates this shape here. And then we've got this, which is our guideline or our fold line. So again, try and keep to one side of that template channel or the other. Keep that straight. There's the letter A there and a letter B here. Probably just about make those out. We don't need to use those. And what we do, if I just take that away, is it gives us our shape like so. Now I've put this square in the middle of the paper because we were filming there, but in reality I think I'd just come back and just line up the side of the template here with the side of the piece of paper, and then have obviously greater economy when I make this like so, and I'll just use the edge of the paper. So I'm going to go on now and cut these two out and then just score the two lines here. So I've cut my shapes out, I've scored that one, and I'm just going to score this one to show you. So it's along that pencil line there. That is 15 millimeters deep. A nice crease. Then again, I just use my ruler here to help me create that and put a nice fold in there, because this mechanism is what's going to slide in and out of the card on this line here. So it's not a bad thing. So again, use your bone folder, pop that over there, piece of paper, and just put a nice crease into those both. Okay, we're now ready to pop them onto the card. So these two sliders are going to come onto our card like so and be glued into position. Now lining them up, there's a couple of things we can do. Remember, I've got my pencil line here. Now, if you go nice and light, now this is very, very dark, just so that it shows up on the camera. But I'm tracing a line across here, and I know that lines up with my two end points. So if this comes down here, and the middle bit lines up in there, I'm pretty sure when that closes, everything's going to be nice and square. So that's one way of doing it. Preferred method maybe. The other thing is to remember where it comes is we've got our A and B lines on here, and those are the actual thickness of our template here. So we could use the template if you wanted to come back, lining up with our original shapes here, and just drop in our A and our B lines down here, and they'll give you two guidelines to work with as well. And that, if we look, now actually matches with my centre line. I'll show you the different methods. Personally, I like the centre line method, but they said the template works perfectly as well with the A and the B. That gives you our guideline. Okay, next thing we're going to do is stick these down, and I'm going to use a little bit of wet glue here, and I would recommend a good wet glue for this. I'll pop that down onto here. Now this isn't, the trouble with what we've got here is that we're not going onto paper. This is a mirror board, so this glue, which normally soaks into it, is going to struggle a bit because it's got nothing to stick onto. But this is an acrylic glue, so it should be okay. I can even use the, so just reach across there. One of these glue pens is actually quite strong. There's a lot of pressure on this. Okay, so that aside, we've got our wet glue. I'm lining it up there. I'm lining it up with here. So my A and B lines are quite good because that helps keep me square. And you'll see now that that lines up into the channel of our fold. Okay, and that's going to come over. Now that line matches with our fold line there, which is why we don't necessarily have to draw those in, but it's just nice to see where everything goes. And I think this is the best way of doing it now. And just hold that into position, make sure everything stays square, and a gentle rub down. And it's not ready to have any pressure put on it, so I'm going to just leave that to dry. But I'm just going to make sure everything's squared up and it's just slightly out. So because it's a wet glue, you can see I've just twisted it slightly, and I'm lining up with my lines here as well. Just make sure that comes in again. I think I'll just let it move as it was drying, you see. So what I can do, as I said, because it's a wet glue, I'm going to just start again, hold that into position, pop it down, and glue it there. Just hold it, and that will be fine. Come back down, and that's all nicely in position there. So I'm going to repeat the same over here as well. But it's important that you do keep these lines fairly square, and I can see that my one there is just slightly off. I haven't been too accurate, which is why, like on that side, I had a slight little falling out as it went over. But the good thing with all of this is that everything is really, really forgiving. So as long as these are near enough, everything will be right. So what's happening is I'm squaring that up here with my centre line there. That goes into my part there. And because that isn't quite square, I need to just move it, and I can see my A and B lines up there. And that's probably the better way of doing it. So now everything stayed in position nicely. And what I did do is just pull it slightly away because I hadn't been that accurate in my folding. Now these will be hidden behind our mechanism. So they create this basic shape here. You can see I just need a little bit more. Again, with the wet glue, I can just change things slightly. I'm just going to line these two up so they're a little bit happier, like so. There we go. Okay, so the next thing to do is just work on the band that holds this all together. That's the inner mechanism there. And I'll just come back to here. And as I said, I'm going to use the outer box. We can see, if we remember this one here, that was our mechanism that slides. And now this is the rectangular shape that's the cover for those sliders. So again, just run along. There's two 90-degree turns at each end. I've made the template work for you like that. And you could just pop a few more guidelines just to help you find your way. So it's this inner rectangle here, and that's the shape I'm left with there. So again, with my craft knife, I'm just going to cut this out. You, of course, could use scissors if you want to, but I think craft knife really does make light work of straight lines and cutting like this. But a guillotine as well, if you're fairly happy with it, or a paper trimmer will work equally as well. Okay. Remember, I've gone quite heavy with my pencil lines so that they show up on the camera for you. You can go a lot lighter. If it's a very small pattern and it doesn't matter where you go, then of course, work on the back of the paper. Right, so that's what we've ended up with here, and that's our strip and the mechanism that works on our card here. So the next thing to do is to bring this back, and we're going to place this over the mechanism like so, close our paper like this, draw into here to create our window shape, and then that will be hiding everything. Now, before we do that, again, we can come back to our template here, and if I just fold those flaps out the way, come back to it here, and just line everything back up like so, allowing for the fact that I've trimmed a little bit of paper. I can pop in some guidelines for where this goes, and that again is the outer edge of the cover, mechanism cover or slider cover that we've just created there. So again, you can use the template, try and be a little bit more accurate. I think I'm a wee bit over there, so I'm going to just do it a little bit by eye, I think. But that's our next move. Other than that, just get it centered, as I said, by eye. I'm going to pop it to there. Now, at this point, we're just going to glue the base of it because we're going to draw it. This is my sort of method for doing it. You could tape it if you wanted to, remove it for cutting. That might be one way, but let me explain what I'm doing and why. First of all, I'm going to pop some glue along the base here to stick it down. Now I'm going to be folding this backwards and forwards a little bit. So put plenty on there. Come back here, and again using my guidelines that I've drawn, which should be a little bit more accurate, I'll just place that down on the middle. It's a wet glue, so I can slide it around a little bit. Happy with that. If it's not quite lined up, we can all square things off at the end, but that's pretty good. Lining it up at the base. The reason for that is because I'm going to need to cut this in a moment, and now I can slide either my cutting mat underneath or a bit of waste card and cut it. So what we're going to do now is fold those two over, have that on the top, fold this over, and use our existing shape here to create our window or our aperture into what's happening. So move that away, we can see that there. Now at this point, if you just taped this down, you could take it off and cut it. I like to keep it into position because, to be honest, I think once I move that, I'm having to realign everything and jiggle it around. So you could, if you've got a smaller cutting mat, or if you want to, just slot your cutting mat now underneath into here. I'm going to use a little bit of waste card and not press down too heavily. And so at this point, just cut those lines out. And so this aperture, you now know, because it's all glued down and you've cut it into position, will fit perfectly with the front cover. And my last line there. I've found a little bit of, I said, old card. As long as you don't want to go through and score what's underneath, a small cutting mat is usually quite useful as well. But I said, if you haven't got that, a little bit of old card will work for you. Failing that, if you're really desperate and nothing's working, you can actually use this template's very, very strong, the Mylar, and you could use that. If you just use this section here, you could use that to cut out and protect your work. This is tough old stuff, so to push, you know, don't be afraid to use that panel if you want to. Okay, now while I've got this here, I've pulled back my mechanism. I want to make sure we can't see any of the gold when we open and close it, but you can see what's happening now. It's all coming together for us like so. And what I can do is just, if I show you here, if you just offset the mechanism, so one goes underneath and one on top, when it closes it will create a center line like so. And then we can open and close it like that. So I'm going to show you that bit, because the next thing to do is put our image in underneath here. And for that, I'm going to use a picture of a train that I've got, and that's going to be my reveal. Now here's my image, and the key thing with what I've got here is measuring the aperture that I've got here. Now the height of this is 60, and obviously then the width is 60. So I've made sure that my image will fit within the 60 and the 60, and also that what we want to do, and again we can come back to the template here and make sure it doesn't go beyond the height of our flaps here. It can be as wide as you like to match within there, but it can't go too tall. So using my template here, I know that my image is well within what I call my safety margin here. If I just draw these lines in, you'll see what I mean. I go top and bottom, that's off the slider mechanism. I know that it's got to fit within there, and it does. So, and also then the width, you can come back and make sure that your image fits within the width, which is going to be of our cover mechanism here. So I can see, and I'm going to use the template to line everything up and say, oh, I want a little bit more there or here. And again, I'll just use that as a guideline for my cutting, because it can't be any wider than that. So that's now kind of sort of framed my image, which is going to be stuck down into the mechanism here. And I said what we don't want it to do is come beyond this cover mechanism, or we'll see it, or taller than that. But it can come out, as you see on the instructions, as a red triangular box. In fact, let me just pull that up and show you, because that now refers to this red box here. You can see as long as we're sitting within that area, we're absolutely fine. Okay, so I'll pop this out. Now, a few golden rules here. The slider mechanisms slide over this. What you can't do is use any decoupage, because if you do that, you are going to make it jam the mechanism. So this has to be fairly flat to allow those sliders. How can you be fairly flat? This has to be flat to allow the sliders to do their thing as they go over top and bottom. There we go. Which is why, I mean, I'm using an image here, but you could, if you wanted to, do some stamping. That would work beautifully, because you could work within the mechanism as well. So, and that's not going to catch on anything. Right, back to this. You can see all my bits and pieces here. I'm going to sort of bend that out the way a little bit. That's going to fit within this area here, like so. So that's my train, which I'm revealing, which will become revealed. So I can just move that around till I'm happy with it. I think that fits. That's okay. So I've got to make sure it doesn't stick out too far top and bottom, and everything looks good, and that will go over and cover it there. So the next thing to do is really glue this all together. Now for this, again, a little bit of wet glue just to buy me some time on the back here to shift it around into position, but I know I'm pretty good. And that all now comes back down to here. I'm just going to line that up. I know it's awkward with this one flapping away, but it does mean that everything's then's in the right place when you want it to be. So again, I'm just going to pop those down. That needs to come up a little bit. You can see why it's great to be able to just do a few changes and movements. Let me pull that out the way for you a bit more there. Okay, so I'm happy with that. That's in there, and if I pop that down, that's where it wants to be as well. Okay, and what's going to happen is that, as I said, is going to hide the mechanism. Now, with one going underneath each other, we get this lovely line. So let me just last and not least show you, because we're going to glue this now. I'm going to glue this strip and then stick it down. Our card's ready and done, ready for decorating. But we've got a choice. The two sliders can go one on top of each other, which creates that kind of shape, or you could flip it over. Sorry, and let me show you, and have that shape on the other side. But I really like just putting one on top of the other here, like so. One on top, one beneath, and then when that closes, it creates this lovely diagonal line. That's what I'm going for. So the next thing to do is glue this strip down here. Again, I keep it nearish to the top. A centimetre band or so is fine. It just allows room. This guides the card and stops the sliders from coming out and trying to force the card apart. The closer you glue this to the sliders, the less that it lifts up, but they're usually pretty good. So one above, one below. Even if you get that bit wrong, you can still kind of pull everything out at the end if you want to as well. Okay, so that's now glued. I'm going to come down, open the card out, it's probably easier to do that and just rest that here like so. Now with the lower part, because we're folding it backwards and forwards and working on it, obviously the more glue you put here, the tighter it holds this down. But I don't think you need to be too worried about that. We can see our measurements, about 10 to 15 millimeters of glue top and bottom, and we're fine. Just going to let that settle, and so we can just have a little play with our card now. We can see that is working absolutely beautifully. So we open it up, and then it closes with our greetings or our image covered up. Now if you've got a rubber stamp, you could stamp an image on here. Remember that we've got to be careful with that slider. If we stick something to it, there's a chance that it might catch as it tries to slide in and out. Now you can get away with it if the paper's thin, and to be honest, have a little play, and you can find, because that lifts up slightly, it's not too bad. But that's for you to go on. I've just kept it plain for the moment. I'm tempted to stick a gear wheel onto that if I can. I'm going to have a little play later on. So that's the basic card sorted out. Now we can go on then and decorate this, and I'll come back to that later on at the end. But you can decorate it however you want. The front cover, it really is up to you. You know, don't hold back. And on the inside, I tend to put a greeting, and I'm going to use, this is actually, the images are from the Mechanica CD that I've got, and I'm going to put a load of little gear wheels down as well all over it, and just really have some fun with this card and decorate it up. Again, I'll come back to that later on, because the next thing I want to do is just talk to you about making this card with the shape. Now, pretty well 90% of everything we've covered is the same. The only thing that's different are the actual flaps and the way that we do the sliders here, but it's pretty much the same mechanism. So I'm going to go on and give you a whole example now and just touch base on that. And we're going to go through this one quite quickly because we've covered the main points in our first card. Okay, so let's make a start. We're going to make this card up exactly the same way. So the only thing that really changes is the shape that we use, and even that makes up all in the same way. Again, probably the only difference with that is that we've got to redraw the shape on the sliders. So what I'm doing here is just again putting my outline in. This time, instead of using the triangle, I'm going to use the shape here, 12-sided shape, and there's 6 of them on there, and I've just moved that out the way. If you do ever move your template, you can of course just reposition everything back, and I just need to drop the fold lines in here, and again I've got those little guidelines there, which, because of our folding methods, we don't normally use, but it's nice to have it in there. Okay, so I'm going to remove that, then I'm going to go on now, cut this out, cut out the shape here, and I'll draw the other bit on to make sure it all lines up, and then we'll put the thing together as I would have on my other card. So my card's now cut out, and I've got my shape here cut out, and again I can do one or two things. I can just pop this one down here, the bit that came out, and use that as the template and just draw around. It really depends how accurate your cutting was, or if you want to, again with that's in position, just pop your template down, line that up with the other 2 halves there, and then you can use this as your guidelines to cut as well, draw around. So I'll go on now and cut this out, and then we'll come back, and the next thing to do will be the mechanisms in there, the slider mechanisms. My card's now cut out, I've got the shape in the front, so I'm back to the template. I want to create my sliders, which I want to use these, and I've got this as my pattern. I'm just going to flip this over onto the back here and put these here because it's a random pattern on the other side. And again, I'm just going to draw the outline like so. And we're just going to go on, pop in the centre line there. I'm going to go on, do 2 of these just like we did last time, draw them up, cut them out and place them down into my card. Now I've cut out my 2 sliders like so and creased those, and they're going to be the bits that slide across, but obviously the shape's going to be different and we're going to look at that because that's the most important part of what we're doing. Again, just for lining up and putting a very faint pencil line. Remember, you can rub all of this out afterwards, and that's going to be my guide there. Okay, so I'm going to go on as per last time and simply glue this here now and then pop that over and just glue everything in position, and then we'll come back. The next thing to do is the cover mechanism, and then I'll show you how we cut this because, well, you'll see when that goes down how it all happens. So again, I'm just going to do the same as we've done last time, pop that to there, hold it against the side there, closing that and just letting that find its way, push it back against it slightly so it's square, you can feel it pushing against it, and then just rest that down and glue it, and then go on and do the same for the other side. Again, we've got to make a cover, and just like last time, what I'm going to do is just draw around the outer box here for my slider cover. Again, this just keeps the mechanism in place. Cut this out and then we'll offer that up onto the card. I'm going to glue the bottom part again, and then we'll cut out the shapes. My slider cover is now cut out, so again some glue on the base here to hold it into position, lock it down, but only on the base. And back again, and you can use the template or just by eye if you want to centre that. Just roughly in the middle there. Remember, it's all quite forgiving, this card. I do appreciate working with a template, things don't always come out straight, and my card's just slightly squiffy, which is why things don't quite line up perfectly. But the beauty of this is they don't have to, it's still all going to work nicely for you. Okay, so that's gluing down there, they're still gluing there, but the next thing to do is to now sort out our mechanisms. So I'm going to pop this on top here, slide that over there. First thing I'm going to do now is just draw around here so that I can cut this shape out, and we know then it just fits underneath there, like so. So again, with a cutting mat or a piece of card underneath here, cut this shape out. So I'm going to go on now and just do that. You can see now we've got our shape there cut out, and if we pull this open, we've got our sliders underneath. So obviously the sliders now work on the other cards, but not on this one. The obvious thing to do is just keep this nice and flat, and then I'm going to just draw around here. Now I've used some thin, very thin cards. My pencil line was trying to jump off, but you'll see I'm trying to press it down quite deeply so it shows up on the camera. If I just move that out the way, can you see I've now got that shape there? So I'm just going to cut that. A handy hint here, both for this one and the other, if you're using this as a guide, remember we're now this side of the line, so cut that side, cut a little bit outside of the line there, then it won't show when it's put down. Same goes for the front as well. It's worth just cutting a little bit inside your pencil line, because we've kind of got this sort of what I call a double template effect. And again, if I just pull this one to the top and hold it down nice and firmly, everything's got to be in position, and I'll go on now and trace my line in there like so. And then fold this out the way, fold that back, and then instead with a cutting mat or some card, I can now go on and I'll just cut these two shapes out, and then everything should look fine. Incidentally, when it comes to cutting these out, you can fold that down behind and then have your cutting mat or whatever just on top here. Saves you trying to pull that thing back when you're doing it. And so as you can see here, what I need to do is just cut a little bit beyond these lines so that it doesn't show, it's nicely back behind the main image. There we go, like so. When this comes down on top, it's all hidden beneath it. So I go on and do the same for this side here. Everything here is now ready. You can see we've got the shapes there, a slider underneath, and this part here. Again, you can have a tip on top and behind, or one on top, one behind, just to create different patterns. I prefer it this way, I think it looks nicer. So the next step now is to put an image in. I want to have these pink roses here, and I've just measured. We know we've got 60 top and bottom and 60 to the side. So back with my trusty template here, and that is the height of the slider, which I can use as a guideline. I'm just lining that up with there, and that just gives me an idea of where I can and can't go, as it were. Just before I do cut it out, let me just show you with this shape here, you've also got a guideline. You know that's what's going to show approximately, well, pretty accurately, what's going to show behind the image there. So you could use this as a guideline as well, your spare cutout, to realise where and how much of that's going to show. So with my image cut out, I pop some glue behind it. I'm just now going to pop that down in here. Bear with me while I try and hold that bit back and just get it where I want it to go, which is roughly there. So a little bit of wet glue just to give you the time to hold. You just want to make sure everything's in position nicely. That just wants to come over a bit. Like so. I think I'm pretty well there. That looks quite nice, so that's good. Last but not least then, a little bit of glue onto here, and our card is done. So a centimetre strip or so of glue across there, 10mm, just to hold it into position. And this one I know is just sticking over the top slightly, so when all's said and done, I'll just trim that last little bit off. But I'll let that glue dry, and I can just come back and sort it out when all is done. But for all intents and purposes, our card is ready. Remember, before you stick this down, to have your sliders in position. If the worst comes to the worst, you can still manipulate it and move them around if they're not in the right position. Okay, so there we go. That's our slider card with the shape there, which I think you'll agree looks really nice. I think it's a lovely surprise for them there. I'm going to let everything dry, come back and decorate these cards, then we'll come back and have a look at them. I've gone on now and embellished these cards, and I can just show you here. So a few things to talk about. You can just obviously put whatever you like on the cover. I've used a couple of the dies from All Occasions range, the cogs here and part of the clock, just cutting it in, and then just putting a little bit of gold strip around the edge there. And I've also put a gold cog on the middle. I'll come back and just chat about that in a moment, but here we go. That's the reveal, and I've put our happy birthday again from our All Occasions die range in there for you. But that is, as ever, just a serving suggestion. It's your card, you make it your way. So a couple of things to say. First of all, I think this works really well. I love this card. I think it looks great when it's got all the embellishments on. The happy birthday can go anywhere that you like. This is just me popping it here. You can have both bits up there. And there's room down here to write the greetings message if you want to. I don't think, there's plenty of room. Don't think there's any problem with that. Or even down the two panels here. Or even if you wanted to, you could put a panel on the back. Now, the other thing I want to tell you about this is that I've put a cog, as you can see, on the middle here. Now, I did warn you that we've got to be very careful if we put anything 3D on here. But I've been playing around, and I thought, if we're clever and careful about this, it should be fine. So let me just explain what I've done. If you want to put something on here, there's no guarantee that it'll always work, but I've used this cog with very sharp corners, so if anything's going to catch, it's going to be this. Now, all I've done is I've glued it just towards the edge here where it slides in under the card, and everything else is left free, and there's just a slight bit of curve on it so it can be pushed up out the way. I haven't glued it right to the edge, just a section around here that slides underneath. And as I open the card, what's happening now is it just pulls away nicely as it gets lifted up here. And I'm going to just turn that at an angle so you can see. So as I pull that like that, it just goes underneath there. And then obviously we pull that one apart, and coming back, because that's slightly curved there, as it hits that one, even with all the teeth that are quite jagged, it just rides above it. And when it's flat, it's just barely noticeable that it's just slightly sticking up. So maybe that's a great way of playing around with ideas for your own cards as well. But I think that looks absolutely fantastic. Another alternative, just to put some stamping on there if you want, but you could, as I've said now, play around with imagery. Now moving on to this card, and again I've just gone on and embellished it here. I've used the new gardening die sets, our all occasion die gardening set, just to keep a gardening theme with it really. Again, no message per se on the front, that all comes on what I call the reveal, and I love this because we open up, again, happy birthday. I've put some edging around here. You could go on even further if you wanted to. Happy birthday, again, the all occasions dies there. And a spade from the gardening set just on the inside as well. And of course we could put a greetings message and actually add some further embellishments if we wanted to. We can see now our two cards here. They are great fun to play with. A sort of his and hers one, but could be his and his, or hers and hers, it's up to you. But the embellishment really does finish these cards off. Okay, so all the techniques are covered now, as we said with this one. I've shown you just the slight variations. Lastly, just one quick note. You can, if you want to, make your cards a little bit shorter. Although you get a certain length with the template. I'll just pull this one in. I only cut a little bit off of it. But you can square them off if you want to as well. Take that measurement and pop it down there. Once you've built it, just square everything off and then go through the mechanisms, popping this bit on, etc. So you can, as I said, make little square cards as well. I thought that's just worth mentioning. You're only limited by where you place the elements on the card. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and you now feel confident to go on and make some hide and slide cards of your own. What I love about these is really just the versatility. There's just no end to what you can do with them. And I think they lend themselves particularly well using the image with rubber stamping, because we need to keep something flat so that the mechanism doesn't jam. But as you can see, we can put images behind, but if you've got the stamps, you can actually stamp onto the aperture at the front. So that wouldn't interfere with the opening of the card, and you could then have two images, one on the front, and then as we open the card, the main reveal underneath as well. But that's up to you. The cards themselves can be decorated, as we've seen. So all in all, it's a really lovely crafting project. They don't take long to make, and I think they do look quite spectacular. It's a little bit of theatre when we open it up, and I think that just makes for a more interesting and exciting card, an unusual one. And again, importantly for me, and I don't know if you feel about this with your card making, but I like to produce something which I know they can't get in the shops or people won't have seen before. So it's something which is a little bit more unique to the person you give it to. Anyway, I will let you get on with your crafting now. Have a go. Always refer back to the video if you're stuck. And the template itself does come with the instructions as well. So between the two, I think you'll be up and running and making fantastic cards of your own in no time at all. Anyway, take care and enjoy your crafting. Bye-bye.